We're live. Well, awesome. So much, so excited to chat with you today, Mercy. I have been a huge fan of you and your work for so long, and been a real inspiration to my career in kind of workplace tooling. So excited to chat with you today on Val's Future of Work series. Thanks so much for joining us. Do you want to share a little bit about kind of what you're working on, where you've come from, kind of your history with the future of work?
Sure. Yeah, I'm a 2X founder. My first company was a gaming company that we actually ran using IRC, and we built this mostly distributed team. I was based in the Bay Area. A lot of folks, including a co-founder, were in the UK and strewn across the United States. So I had a prepared mind when Slack came out, and I was lucky to be able to join that company early on, where I was head of growth and worked in a bunch of sort of like different team building roles there. Then I left. I was a VC for a couple of years, and now I'm on startup number two. We're in stealth, but it's largely a growth platform for teams. If folks want to check it out at kenobi.com.
Kenobi.com. That's awesome. I love that phrase. You had kind of a prepared mind. Can you tell me a little bit more about like that? Sounds like there's a handle, something more behind it.
I think it's something I picked up from other VCs when I was investing, and it's about meeting every company in the space. Something that I saw when I was angel investing that was hugely different from institutional investing. I would hear through my network about some cool sounding company or some badass founder, and then send it to a VC and say, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And they would say, "Oh yeah, so there are 7 of these companies. They're all like exactly the same. They all got started at the same point," and it really blew my mind that that is kind of how ideas, the zeitgeist of even a business concept really kind of permeates culture and society, and you end up getting these really similar things. And so the more first party research you can do as an investor or frankly as a founder, the better. The number of founders that I would meet that hadn't Googled that deeply into the sector or the idea that they were hoping to build in was kind of a shock.
Right, totally. That makes me think a lot of the all the different things over time that have been like discovered simultaneously, like calculus. And it's interesting to think about how much more information is more widely available, and so more likely that people are going to come at the same ideas around the same time.
Yeah.
I'm curious, as you think about that, the zeitgeist, and you're thinking about kind of future of work. You've been working in the future of work for a long time. I'm curious how you've seen, what is the future of work and how that's changed. Like 5-10 years ago, what was the future of work? And now, what is the future of work?
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like the future of work used to really mean we were taking a lot of it mobile devices and getting blue collar workers, pink collar workers onto these, cloud-based platforms that knowledge workers were already really heavily using. And then it seems like around, frankly, the pandemic taking hold and everyone being forced to be remote, it became this like future of remote work, future of work started to really overlap each other quite a bit. And it felt for a little bit like we were kind of done-ish on the knowledge worker side. We'd continue to collaborate online, but there wouldn't be seismic behavioral or technical shifts. And then it will be very interesting. One of the trends that I've been watching is AI and what it's going to do to jobs like marketing writing in general, the creation of ads, the creation of any kind of really like marketing or art or graphic work. I've been seeing now, and not even just on articles about AI, but seeing AI generated, paintings and images accompanying articles online.
Totally.
That's only going to continue. It'll be really interesting.
Yeah, no, I'm super fascinated with that. I've also just personally thinking maybe I should get into children book writing now that I can have my own illustrator in Stable Diffusion, right? There's just so many more possibilities. That's really fascinating to think about, especially on the marketing side. I don't know if you've seen the slides of I think it was called the MarTech 7000 or something it's called now, which is just this really beautiful set of slides of how many different tools there are just for supporting the marketing industry. And every year there's an order of magnitude more. And it's just marketing definitely has definitely exploded in terms of knowledge work and the tooling and functionality and specificity of the roles. Really fascinating to watch that.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I wonder if there's a collapse of a lot of those things as a lot of those functions just get eaten by AI. You don't need a copywriter optimizing ad copy when that can be a totally self-contained system.
Totally. Oh, that is super fascinating. I'm curious when you start talking about like the bleeding between kind of the future of work and the future of remote work. What are some trends that you're seeing there as those kind of like collapse into two? Sorry, into one.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of it is this kind of stuff. So that, being on video platforms, people getting used to working this way too. I'll occasionally live in San Francisco, and I think you live in San Francisco
I
as
do
well.
indeed.
We're not sitting together in
Yeah.
person doing this, right? And I'll get, coffee invites or things like that for people. And it's funny because now, after a couple of years of working totally remotely, as well as a year of really concentrated customer development and research and building on my own company, I feel like there's the in-person meeting can be good, but it's pretty lossy
Mm-hmm.
because you don't have a transcript, you don't have a recording. And so I have been doing, for a year basically, these pretty intense customer development interviews and play sessions with the tool and things like that. And I am learning at probably 3x the speed that I would be otherwise because I get on Zoom. I ask, hey, can I record this? Everyone literally always says yes. It's really
Mm-hmm.
fantastic. People are very used to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I actually have to buy a transcript because the audio transcription technology hasn't been trained with female voices. And so I've yet to
Wow.
use a platform that can tell the difference between two women's voices speaking, which
Wow.
is very irritating. But so I have to pay between kind of 50 and $150 per meeting to get it transcribed at a high level of fidelity, which is irritating. But then I have this video artifact, I have this transcript, and I'll go through and I'll reread it several times. I'll pull notes out and I hear things, I learn
Mhm.
things the second and third time that I would have totally forgotten.
Totally.
And the same thing with writing more too. I have a totally remote team. My co-founder lives in Brooklyn. We have folks in Vancouver and soon Washington and Texas, and God only knows where after that. Maybe even someday one more person in the Bay Area.
Right, right. Little pod
um,
here.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's amazing because I think a lot about, I mean, especially with the customer development use case. One of the things that I've loved about using Val for all of our customer development is we make all of those videos available to everyone in the workspace.
Yeah,
So if I'm ever searching for insights, I'm like, oh, you know what we're thinking about? A Notion integration. So I can like search Notion integration. And every call that anyone on my team has had with anyone that
so
has mentioned
cool.
Notion integration, like
Yeah,
pops up and I can go like right to that point in the transcript and like make a little clip and like collect all that. I'm like, okay, this is looking like a trend. Yes, no, things like that.
yeah,
Which just like massively changed how quickly we can like re-reference information without having to like run new studies or rely
absolutely.
on, again, like lossy human brains to be like, do you remember like how important is the Notion integration? Um,
Yeah, exactly. And it may be heavily influenced by how you feel about the Notion integration, but also how sleepy were you that day? When was the last time you had a snack,
right, right. Oh, there's so much data about like, even the like judges passing down like harsher sentencing, like when they're hungry.
Right before lunch, yeah.
Exactly. Versus like right after lunch, where they're the softer
Yeah,
sentencing.
exactly.
So
Yeah,
it's
I always tell people that when I'm, being pitched to speak at a conference.
you're
I'm
like,
like,
okay,
I'll do it
after lunch.
as long as you don't give me that 11 a.m. slot.
That's amazing. Yeah, you want everyone fresh off their coffee break, right? Like
Exactly.
energized and excited. I love that. That's so smart. That's fascinating. So you mentioned kind of a little bit about the value of having kind of these recordings and these transcripts, which I tell you, I swear by that all day.
Yeah.
Um, you could use Val and you get everyone's voice transcribed independently, so that can be a little saving tip
Oh,
there.
yeah.
I
True.
didn't realize about like the distinguishing between female voices, but that makes sense. Very few things are tested on women.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
neither here nor there.
Seat
I
belts, transcription.
know, right? Like just like AR is like making women like more dizzy and all that. It's fat. We could talk about that one for a long time. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Very strong feelings there. I'm curious a little bit about kind of how you think about the value. I mean, keeping people in the loop and like
Mm.
communication and coordination, collaboration. That's like where a lot of your product career and a lot of what you've built is kind of around that.
Yeah.
I'm curious how you've seen the need for that, the tools for that, like all of that kind of evolve over the past few years? If there's any kind of trends or insights there that you're seeing.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a few separate threads of work. So one is having a team that's gelled and has a good rapport and has enough, you know, positive social experiences with each other that you feel like, okay, it's this team. And I know, for instance, I know my co-founder really well. We worked together for years at Slack and then remained friends afterwards and traveled together even. And so I can read his tone and what's going on with him, including, a better read of his tone than I think I would have for other people over things like text in Slack or text messages or email and things like that. So I think it is that live simultaneous time is really well spent just vibing with your team. So we're doing retreats. We were going to do it more often, but it's turned out that we probably only need to do it twice a year. But we have this fully remote team, and so what we're doing is meeting up, and we'll have some big conversations to have. Right now it's roadmaps and customers and things like that. But then the rest of our time spent together is hanging out and building up those hours that we don't get because we're not in an office together. And you end up needing to draw down from that for, difficult decisions and hard discussions later on. So that's one thing. And that's like the collaboration stuff that makes everything else easier. Basically, you've built up a bank of good vibes with your team. Yeah. But then, it's interesting because for product people, especially, I think it's a lot more IC time than PMs have needed to have in the past. When previously I could have a meeting, I could grab a designer and get in front of a whiteboard. Now I need to make a short video detailing the bug because I can't just show it to an engineer. And then we've become, I think, a little bit more similar to engineers in that we really do need uninterrupted hours of flow to write, because if you thought writing was an important part of the PM skill set before, oh man, you better be a good writer now because you're not going to get anything done if you're just, and I do mean this in a pejorative way, but like the influencer type of a PM who's just really good at talking, really good at interviewing. And then you're like, wow, so you're going to
do something
or QA this product? No? Okay. I didn't think so.
That hits. That resonates so deeply.
We've all worked with them.
Oh my God. It's interesting because at Vowel, we're also fully remote. We're actually global. We're, I think, in 9 or 10 different time zones.
Wow.
That one's real fun. So we've had some really interesting things, even just writing up guidelines for how to use Slack to communicate effectively, which I feel like I didn't have to have in previous companies because you got so much of that FaceTime to get each other's vibes that Slack kind of just worked. So it's been really interesting thinking about when you need to get not more formal, but just give people a little bit more education. We focus a lot on helping people just think about formatting information, putting more time into thinking how to format the information for the reader's sake versus from the writer's sake of this is the fastest way for me to say this thing. So I'm just gonna send it off. So I'm curious if you've found things that have felt different. I assume you're using Slack for everything. Are there things that feel different about how you use the tool now in this more fully remote environment where you've had less FaceTime with these people? I mean, obviously your co-founder you've had a lot of FaceTime with, but your new one is less so.
Yeah. It's interesting because, and we talk, I've talked with a number of also ex-Slack employees about this. And of course, I'm probably one of the more responsible parties, having not built this into the product when it was my area of the product to build it into. But I really feel like we were not opinionated enough about how to use Slack. So all low-key watch other teams use Slack or, see clips of different things. And I'll be shocked when I see, for instance, the number of channels that people have. So we are about a 6-person team right now, and we have 20 channels. And we use all of them because they're all actually for pretty specific different things. So that's one thing. And then because we always had a substantial presence in Vancouver, and our CEO and founder actually lived there full time and then would travel down to San Francisco. And then, of course, later offices. We did always have this culture of what we called the library, where you actually weren't supposed to talk that much in a Slack office.
Amazing.
And it would be like quiet, and it definitely it weirded people out, and maybe it attracted the right kind of person. So it was a fine, cultural thing. But we'd be sitting there quietly, like tippy tap typing to each other.
Amazing.
Sharing memes.
That's amazing. I feel like Asana had something pretty similar, which I think kind of, came from our founder, who's a little bit of an introvert, a lot of bit of an introvert. But the growth team was always like super chatty. There was like that one section of the floor where like growth was, and it was like, what? So I just always associate growth teams with like vivacious energy.
Yeah, that's not wrong. I think, part of the challenge of growth teams is that you are by far the fastest moving product organization. Moving, really 5 to 10x the speed of other organizations. And so, there's a lot of frenetic energy. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, one last thing I wanted to chat with you about. I love meetings, bit of a meeting nerd, have been for many, many years. Part of why I'm at Val.
Yeah.
And a little bird flew by and told me that you at Slack were the person kind of identified as kind of the meeting expert and would teach people how to have good meetings. So I'm curious, first of all, like, how did people discover this about you? How did you discover this about yourself? And what did you teach people?
Yeah, so I don't know. I like a good meeting. I like to know. I mean, I'm an extrovert, and so I am the kind of person who would be probably pretty fine in a meeting, but I hate the feeling of like being read aloud to in school. Do you remember that in elementary school? It drove me insane. I was also a strong reader, so it was very irritating. But sitting there listening to, and then the work equivalent of that is you're in a meeting, someone's giving a presentation, and they're reading those slides out loud. You're like, wow, this did not have to be a meeting. You could have definitely emailed me these slides, because I can also read. It's one of the things that qualified me to be in this meeting.
Goes along with the dating skill.
Yeah, gotta also read. It's an important part of it. And so, I think, I just like, this is what I'm like. I just I don't kind of suffer fools and like to waste time. And so at Slack, I had a team where we were one of the last kind of product pillars in the organization to get a dedicated engineering management team who were all, managing the same engineers and things like that. So the engineers on my team would often report into very different parts of the organization, and they started to tell their managers that I had a very well-run product team, and compared to the other product teams that they had been on, it was pretty efficient. And especially my weekly meetings, where I would look at the agenda ahead of time and cut the meeting time if it was obviously not enough stuff for the full, hour or a half hour. I started asking for feedback at the end of meetings, and self-criticizing in front of it too. I did pre-mortems with my team as well. So, we're going to ship this big thing. It's 4 months in the future. It's out. And we whiffed it. What happened? And once you start asking those, kind of questions and pulling that out, that's a great use of a meeting, because you can create this safe space with your tone and how you show up. And so when we were doing, we were hiring just an enormous number of people at Slack, we would have days where 40 new people would show up. It was crazy. And we had special training for managers. And so I did the section of that training that was about running a great meeting. And so, I told people, don't have a recurring meeting, for instance, that just goes off forever into the future. It's going to be really useful for a while, but that's a huge part of getting feedback at the end of the meeting, is to actually question the premise. We're all here in this meeting. Do we need to be?
Totally.
What do other people think?
Momentum is like so powerful. It's so hard to like stop and say, like, why are we doing this process? Why are we having this meeting? Like, is it still critical? And I think when you set perpetual things in motion, it takes a lot of energy to stop them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, it's your job as a manager is to enable people and speed them up. And it's funny, I've pushed back as my co-founder and I talked about the future of our company. One of the things that we're thinking to do is to not have very many managers at all. And I have kind of a spicy question for you, but if you think that the job of a manager is to make that team more performant, more efficient, and better at their work, how many good managers have you had or known?
I mean, I've known a lot that are really great gatekeepers and like reputation managers of like, okay, let's make sure the company thinks my team is doing a great job.
Let's make sure I look good.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Which is like the incentive, right? You have to always think about the incentives at play. And I think it's really hard to like push a system outside of its incentives.
Yes.
So like maybe just like having fewer managers is the answer.
Yeah. I think we're going to find out.
I'm very excited to watch that experiment. One thing that you mentioned that really stood out to me is the concept of spreading that knowledge around the organization where you had a lot of engineers that were working with different managers. And that's something that I have seen be super successful in a couple different ways at Vowel. That's been awesome to watch, of just like sharing an engineer with a different team for a sprint, just to like spread the knowledge of like how do different teams work. And one thing that I've just really loved watching is, we have a shout outs channel in our Slack. I love shout outs. Everyone kind of like shout out to this person for blah, 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 blah. And I remember, we had like a shout out to this team lead, ran a really great like sprint planning. It was just like left everyone feeling so excited and so energized. And the other team leads were like, oh, can you like share that recording with me? I want to see like what made it different, what made it special. And it's like, sure, like paste, like here, now you have that meeting. And it's been really great to see that information spread more organically throughout an organization of like what's going well, without having to like actually like send people around necessarily. So I'm really excited to see how that evolves over time as more meetings become more digital versus this analog lossy thing that we have today or had.
Exactly. And I've been, I feel for the Zoomer generation, Gen Z, coming into the workplace now, missed out on a few years of, college and or high school, really like rough. And then now joining organizations that are, hybrid or fully remote, because so much of your first kind of 5 years just in the workplace is being a fly on the wall and having the opportunity to see, oh, this is how AMC runs this meeting. Oh, this is how Merci like detangle this issue between design and engineering. And not that that person is on our teams, but that because they, we all were in the same office together, they could overhear and see examples of different people and their different styles. And then hear the back channel from the people. If like I walk away and the designer and the engineer are like, well, we don't like each other, but we just like her more. That's bad. And so, I mean, this seems like a pretty good solution to that, where at least you can, create kind of more walls for the people that hang out and sort of like look around.
Totally. It's amazing how much I learned from just identifying who were the rock stars, like who are the people that are doing so well at what they do, and even not working in their department or organization at all, still just kind of like being like, oh, okay, I know that when they say something, I'm going to pay extra attention because they're so well respected and get such great results. And I feel like we just have less access, like there's less internal transparency because there's so much information running around, digitally. It's like the cues of like who's looking where, going where, saying what to whom are like much more subtle clues that you can pick up on versus like, I'm not going to stalk other people's Slack channels. Like maybe a little bit, just a little bit.
Hey, that's just doing research.
Yes, exactly. Well, this has been so fascinating. Love chatting with you about future work. Thank you so much for joining the Vowel Future Work series. I can't wait to chat with you in the future.
Yeah, great.
Awesome. Bye-bye.
Bye.